My work is really inspired from my memory and narratives in my life, my personal life. And I think that recently I've had a lot of time to unpack how I've grown up. I was born in New Delhi, India, and I came here at a young age, and I grew up in Houston, Texas, and spent most of my time in Texas, and then came up here to the Midwest recently. And so I think I draw upon a lot of the feelings around race and what it is to be a brown woman in a space that is like very white predominantly. And so feeling this I think a lot of these themes came into my work more recently because of my geographical location and moving from a super huge metropolitan city like Houston, in which I don't feel so different, and then moving to the Midwest and kind of realizing like, oh, I'm feeling a little bit of like an other here. And so that's where really I think my work has taken off as I've moved around and really come into my own and really reflected on some of my experiences growing up. And so a lot of the work just comes from a super personal space. Lately, it's been a lot of, and that includes like gender studies, what it means to be a woman, what it means to be a queer woman. And so some of those themes have started to really like come up in the work too. My name is Preetika Rajgariah, and I am an interdisciplinary artist. My aunt, actually, my mom's oldest sister, is an artist as well. And so growing up, she was super influential, but she also taught chemistry. And so she had these kinds of two interests that paralleled my interests. And we used to watch like Bob Ross painting shows together when she used to come to America and come to our home. And I remember we used to get all the supplies and like watch Bob Ross and paint happy trees together. I've been doing art my whole life. It's been something I did recreationally growing up forever. It was like my favorite elective all the time. And when I got to undergrad, which was at Trinity, which is a really small liberal arts school, I went for pre-med. And so I really didn't pursue art professionally, I would say, until I realized it could be a career that I saw other people doing. And so I was like, wow, this is something I can do. Like, this is something I'm really passionate about, and I want to do that. So I switched gears completely, and I went that direction. And then I taught a little bit outside of graduating. I taught K through 12 art, and decided that wasn't for me. And so a few years into that, I really pursued being a full-time artist, and have been since, figuring out what that means in the real world and then in my own practice. I come from a very traditional painting background. That meant, oil painting, acrylic, watercolor. I did a long series of watercolor paintings for a long time. And then when I started doing mixed media work with the painting. So that's when, I would say, several years ago, I started incorporating textile and fabric into my paintings. And then when I got here in Urbana-Champaign, I basically took the paint out of the focus, and started really focusing on textile and fabric, which was something that was something that I just spent a lot of time in my life, not necessarily in my art life, but in my family life, with my connecting with my mother and my aunts, and like the women in my family, we were all just like, we've always been really into fabric and textile and fashion and, you know, things like that. I have a really like repetitive experience growing up in elementary school that I really remember often because it came up so much. And it was, you know, I grew up in suburban Houston, so I was like the one of 2 brown kids in this whole elementary, so whatever. And kids used to ask me what I was. And so it was, I used to say, oh, I'm Indian. And they would be like, oh, well, dot or feather? And it was this like thing that they did. That was this, like, one day I'll make a performance about that motion. But, so I got used to, so I would respond dot, which I'd also never said that about myself before. I was like, what does that even mean? As I would get this question asked, I started responding dot, not feather. Oh, I'm Indian, dot, not feather. And I just like put it in my narrative because it was always like asked of me anyway. It was like always the follow-up question. So it's like so funny, but like so wrong, and it's all the things. That piece is inspired from a portrait of my face covered in bindis. So I took the dot and I start with it placed here, and then I ended up covering my whole face in these bindis to really respond to that question. As I reflect on that now as a grown adult, that's what the piece is about. A lot of my process now starts with moving my hands in material. So I really need to feel that sort of instinctual like attraction to a thing. And then it usually sparks another, like a memory or a story, and that's how I kind of start my process. There are a lot of tedious tasks in my work. Like I love repetitive motion. I think accumulation has always been a part of my practice. If I look back at my old paintings, and mark making has always been a huge part of my 2D work. And so in the same way, I like to take these materials, whether it's using a sewing machine 800 times or whether it's making my own kind of weave out of thread a million times. And so I get really in the zone with repetition and with my materials. The group of aunties that I have been making are sculptural pieces that are made out of these old saris and textiles that my mom and aunts have given me. And they are hollow, like wrapped forms that are supposed to, that reference the body, but not necessarily are so, oh, that's definitely a head or that's definitely a hand. So they're loosely based off of the body. And I wanted to bring my painting off of the wall. I wanted to go into sculpture. So I started using a plastic polyacrylic material to stiffen the fabric and make these life-size, in relationship to my body, life-size figures. And I really wanted to imbue this sense of like power and woman, and I wanted to play with tradition, like traditional beauty in my culture, and I wanted to play with that and kind of challenge it and just have fun. I really wanted to have fun and pull from like cultural signifiers that again, this is where the memory comes in, that like come into my field, whether that's like henna painting or adorning with jewels, and just that flashy exoticism kind of comes into the mix too. I call them aunties just because that feels intimate to me and it feels close to me in a way that I like. But the series overall is titled Soft Bodies. I started thinking about like the culture around tea and how it's really turned into this, you know, huge money-making market, and how capitalism has kind of swallowed this thing that I've always celebrated as like chai time with my family, and I still do it now. So I started thinking about my own consumption of tea, and I've been collecting tea bags over the past year, thinking about how that tea bag has turned into this really like exotic practice, whereas it's so banal to me. But so there are all these things that I'm kind of like thinking about when it comes to tea, which it's not like a really original material, and I'm really aware of that, but it's something that I really hold dear to my life. I really hope that people kind of walk away with a different understanding of what it is to be American, and how it is so many things that is not shown, that is not in media, and I just hope that people walk away with a little like a nod of appreciation, maybe. Our community as like South Asian people and women are like portrayed in a really specific way that I don't necessarily, I'm not a fan of. And so I hope that with my work, I like to kind of combat some of those stereotypes and some of those notions, and I just hope that people walk away with a different view, kind of maybe I've taught them something, maybe like expanded a little bit of their knowledge. I have started to delve into performance, and that is so, it is so exciting, but it is so scary to me, and in a good way. And I think that recently I've been using my body as the material, and I'm looking forward to really pushing that. I bring in the same kind of materials that have been in my practice recently, like cultural materials, and I've started to really play with how they interact with my body, how a material transforms from its like intended purpose to having a new meaning. So I'm kind of reappropriating materials with myself. And so that's what I'm really looking forward to playing with in the next few years.
To get involved and support the Urbana Public Arts program, please contact the Public Arts Coordinator Rachel Storm at rlstorm@urbanaillinois.us or 217-328-8265.